Hello and welcome to the TreeWalker channel's What the Soil Remembers podcast. This is episode 3, What Grows Where Nothing Else Will. There's a kind of knowledge that doesn't disappear all at once. It erodes, slowly, quietly, until one day, something that once fed people for thousands of years is treated like a mistake. It's pulled, it's sprayed, it's erased. Not because it stopped working, but because we stopped recognizing it. I want to talk today about a plant that thrives in places most crops refuse to grow. Wet ground, poor soil, edges, margins. A plant that doesn't wait for perfect conditions, and one that tells us about how we decide what food is allowed to be. Long before agriculture had rules, people gathered what sustained them. They learned the land by watching what returned each year, what stored energy, what helped them to endure the hardship. Some foods weren't planned at first. They were noticed. One of these foods was a small underground tuber that grows beneath grass-like stems, hidden from sight. To ancient people, it wasn't hidden at all. It was familiar. It was Chufa, or also known as tiger nuts. Archaeology tells us that humans were harvesting this plant tens of thousands of years ago, before fields, before fences, and before ownership. In the Nile Valley, it became something more than a gathered food. It became deliberate. People dried it. They stored it. They carried it through the seasons when nothing else survived. They ate it in life. They prepared it for death. That alone tells us something important. You don't place something in a grave unless you believe it matters. Across cultures, this plant followed trade routes and memory. From Africa into the Mediterranean, into Iberia, into kitchens where it became drinkable, grindable, storable, nourishment. It didn't need refrigeration. It didn't need protection. It waited patiently until it was needed. That patience is part of what made it valuable. This plant stores its energy underground. That simple fact changes everything. It means drought doesn't end it. Fire doesn't end it. Harvest doesn't end it. It regenerates quickly, season after season, building a reserve beneath the surface. Not fast, not flashy, but relentless. From a nutritional perspective, it is unusually complete. It provides carbohydrates that release slowly, fats that resemble those found in stable, long-used food oils, protein that supports the body without demanding complexity. It doesn't spike. It doesn't crash. It sustains. Which raises a question worth sitting with. Why did we stop growing foods like this? Modern agriculture favors visibility, tall crops, uniform fields, clear rows, plants that don't behave that way, that spread underground, that resist removal, that refuse to die on schedule. Well, they become inconvenient. Not dangerous, inconvenient. This tuber doesn't fit neatly into systems designed around annual planting and total control. It doesn't require fertilizer in the way other crops do. It doesn't depend on pesticides to survive. It doesn't exhaust the soil. It simply continues. And in a system built on inputs, continuation without dependence is a problem. Over time, language did the work that chemicals couldn't do alone. What was once described as food became labeled as a nuisance. What regenerated became invasive. What endured became unacceptable. Once that shift happens, everything else follows. Research stops asking how to use it. Funding stops flowing. Education teaches eradication instead of understanding. As a plant that once represented security becomes something to eliminate. Here's the quiet irony. The very traits that make this plant difficult to control are the traits that once made it invaluable. It grows where others fail. It stores energy safely. It doesn't demand perfect conditions. It survives disruption. In other words, it behaves like a survival food. In some places, the knowledge never disappeared. Communities continue harvesting it. Markets continue trading it. Drinks, flowers, and snacks carried the memory forward, not as nostalgia, as practicality. And recently, that knowledge has begun resurfacing elsewhere, not through tradition, but through curiosity. People encountering it again ask questions no one encouraged them to ask before. What happens when food doesn't need permission? What happens when resilience undermines dependency? What happens when abundance doesn't align with the systems built to manage scarcity? What happens when the current food system crashes? These are uncomfortable questions, not for the land, but they are uncomfortable for us. This plant doesn't ask to be reclaimed. It doesn't need defending. It doesn't need to be rediscovered. It never left. It just sat there, waiting. If you ever notice something that refuses to disappear despite effort, despite pressure, despite eradication campaigns, it's worth pausing before calling it a problem. Sometimes persistence is information. Sometimes what survives is what we should be paying attention to. The land has always remembered what feeds us. The question isn't whether the knowledge exists, it's whether we're willing to listen yet again. Thank you again for joining me for episode 3 of What the Soil Remembers. If you liked the episode, click the like button. If you really liked it and aren't, consider subscribing. And drop a comment down below. Let me know what you like, what you don't like about it. As you can tell when I say and stuff a lot, this is 100% me, 100% human, no AI. Okay, so if you like it, like, subscribe. We've been through all that. I hope to see you on the next one, and I hope you're enjoying this as much as I am.